The stranger at dawn. The television's glow died with a soft click, plunging the living room into darkness. My father stood silhouetted against the window, his shoulders rigid as iron bars. Get out. 2 words. That's all it took to shatter 18 years of my life into fragments I couldn't begin to piece together. I sat frozen on the couch, the remote still warm in his hand, my half-eaten dinner congealing on the coffee table between us. Dad, I said, get out. His voice was flat, mechanical, as if he'd rehearsed this moment in his mind 1,000 times. Take whatever you can carry. You have 10 minutes. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand an explanation for this sudden exile. But something in his posture, the way he wouldn't turn to face me, the tremor in his clenched fist, told me that speaking would only make it worse. So I did what I'd learned to do over the years. I stayed quiet. My feet moved on autopilot up the stairs to my bedroom. 10 minutes. What do you pack when your entire world collapses in 10 minutes? I grabbed my backpack and started throwing things in. Clothes, my laptop, phone charger, the photograph of my mother that I kept hidden in my desk drawer. She died when I was 7, and sometimes I wondered if that's when my father had started dying too. Just more slowly. 8 minutes left. I shoved in my toothbrush, some books, the little bit of cash I'd been saving from my part-time job at the grocery store. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely zip the bag. When I came back downstairs, my father was exactly where I'd left him, still staring out that window into the darkness of our suburban street. I paused at the bottom step, hoping he'd turn around, hoping he'd changed his mind, hoping this was some cruel test I could still pass. He didn't turn. I walked out the front door and heard it lock behind me. The November air bit through my jacket as I stood on the sidewalk, backpack slung over one shoulder, staring at the only home I'd ever known. Lights glowed warmly in the neighbors' windows, the Petersons watching their nightly game show, the Chens probably finishing dinner, old Mrs. Alvarez already in bed at her usual 8 o'clock. Normal lives continuing normally, while mine had just imploded. I started walking. No destination, just away. My best friend Marcus lived 6 blocks over, but it was nearly 9 on a Tuesday, and I couldn't just show up at his door with this insane story. Hey, can I crash on your couch indefinitely because my dad kicked me out for reasons unknown? The community park offered the only shelter I could think of. It had a covered picnic area where I could at least get out of the wind while I figured out what to do next. I settled onto a wooden bench, pulled my jacket tight, and tried to make sense of the senseless. What had I done? Dinner had been quiet, like always. I'd microwaved us both lasagna from the freezer, like always. We'd eaten in front of the TV, watching the news, like always. Then during a commercial break, he just snapped. Unless it wasn't sudden at all. Unless I'd been missing signs, too wrapped up in my own senior year drama. College applications, SAT scores. Whether Katie Morrison would go to prom with me to notice my father unraveling. I must have dozed off eventually because I woke to the sound of footsteps on gravel. My neck ached from the awkward angle against the wooden backrest, and early morning light was just beginning to gray the sky. A figure approached through the mist that hung low over the grass. "You must be Marcus," the man said. I sat up straight, instantly alert. "I'm not. How do you know my name?" He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and a worn leather jacket that had seen better decades. His face was weathered but kind, with deep lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more than he frowned. "Your father told me where you'd be," he said, settling onto the bench across from me without invitation. "Well, not in so many words, but I know Richard. I know how he thinks. You know my dad?" I pulled my backpack closer, every stranger danger lesson from childhood suddenly screaming in my head. "Who are you?" "Name's Thomas Webb. I was your father's partner a long time ago." He pulled out a thermos from his jacket pocket and unscrewed the top. "Coffee? It's still hot." The smell alone nearly made me weep. "I don't understand. My dad was an accountant." "He is now." Thomas poured the steaming liquid into the thermos cap and handed it to me. "Drink first, then I'll explain. Though I should warn you, nothing I'm about to tell you will make this easier." I wrapped my hands around the makeshift cup, letting the warmth seep into my frozen fingers. The coffee was good, strong and sweet. I drank it in 2 long gulps while Thomas watched me with patient eyes. "Your father wasn't always an accountant," he began. 25 years ago, we worked together for a government agency you've never heard of. Still classified, actually. But given the circumstances, I think we can bend the rules." I laughed, but it came out harsh and bitter. "This is insane! You're insane!" "I know how it sounds." Thomas refilled the cap and handed it back. "But I need you to listen, because your father's life might depend on it, and possibly yours too." That stopped me cold. "What?" "We worked in intelligence. Not the glamorous spy stuff you see in movies. Mostly we dealt with information, patterns, connections that others missed. Richard was brilliant at it. He could see things in data that nobody else could. Make connections that seemed impossible until he proved them right." Thomas paused, his gaze distant. "Then we caught a case that changed everything." The park was waking up around us. A jogger passed by, earbuds in, oblivious. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. "There was a network," Thomas continued, "of people who'd been embedded in various positions of power. Government, corporate, military. They'd been there for years, decades even, working towards something we never fully understood. We started pulling threads, and the whole thing began to unravel. We got close, too close, then people started dying. My coffee suddenly tasted like ash." "What people?" "Our team. One by one, made to look like accidents. A car crash here, a heart attack there. Richard's wife, your mother, she wasn't supposed to be in that intersection when the truck ran the red light." The park tilted. I gripped the edge of the bench to steady myself. "My mother's death was an accident. The police said what they were told to say." Thomas's voice was gentle but firm. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I wish none of this were true, but your father made a choice that night. He agreed to disappear, to become someone else, to never investigate another thing for the rest of his life. In exchange, they'd leave him alone. They'd leave you alone." "Who's they?" My voice sounded far away, like someone else was speaking. "We never found out. That was part of the problem, and part of why Richard agreed to the terms. He couldn't fight an enemy he couldn't identify, and he had a 7-year-old son to protect." Thomas leaned forward. "So he became Richard Larson, accountant, moved across the country, raised you in quiet anonymity, and for 11 years, it worked. Until yesterday. Until yesterday, Thomas confirmed. He got a message, same type they used to use when we worked together, coded, untraceable. It said they knew about you. It said the deal was off. I stood up, paced away from the bench, then back. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. Organizations don't just, don't they? Thomas raised an eyebrow. Look at the world, Marcus. Look at what we learn years later about what was really happening behind closed doors. At least once a decade, something comes out that sounds exactly like what I'm describing, and we all act shocked that such things could happen. He wasn't wrong, but I didn't want him to be right either. So he kicked me out to, what, protect me? To save your life, Thomas said. If they're watching, and they probably are, they needed to see you leave. They needed to believe that Richard had cut all ties, that you were no longer leverage they could use against him. But I'm still his son. How does throwing me out change that? It doesn't change the biology, but it changes the relationship in their eyes. You're no longer the thing he loves most, the thing he'd do anything to protect. You're just the kid he finally got tired of and threw out. Thomas stood and stretched, his knees cracking. The question now is what we do next. We? I didn't come here just to explain things. I came to offer you a choice. He looked at me seriously. You can stay away, build a new life somewhere else. I can help with that. New identity, some money to get started, a clean break. By the time you're 25, this will feel like a strange dream you once had. Or you help me figure out what your father found. Thomas pulled out a small USB drive from his pocket. He sent me this yesterday, before he kicked you out. It's encrypted, and I haven't had time to crack it yet. But Richard always said you inherited your mother's mind. Sharp, analytical, good with patterns. If there's anyone who could make sense of whatever he left us, it's you. I stared at the small black device in his palm. Why would I do that? Why wouldn't I just disappear like you said? Because they killed your mother. Because your father spent 11 years living in fear, dying a little more each day, turning into a ghost of who he used to be. Because if we don't figure out what they're planning, they'll keep doing this to other families, other people who get too close. He held out the drive. And because despite everything, you want to understand, you want to know why your life just fell apart. I can see it in your eyes. He was right. I hated that he was right. I took the USB drive. Good, Thomas said. There's a diner 2 blocks north. Let's get you some real breakfast, and then we'll get started. The diner was a relic from the 1950s, all chrome and red vinyl, with a waitress who called everyone Han and coffee that could strip paint. We took a booth in the back corner, and Thomas ordered us both the special, eggs, bacon, hash browns, toast. I realized I hadn't eaten since those few bites of lasagna last night. While we waited for the food, Thomas pulled out a laptop from a messenger bag I hadn't noticed before. He plugged in the USB drive, and lines of code began scrolling across the screen. Your father always was paranoid about security, he muttered. 3-layer encryption at least. Can you break it? Given enough time, yes, but time might be something we don't have much of. He glanced up at me. Did your father ever mention any numbers to you? Dates? Codes? Anything that seemed out of place? I thought back through 18 years of memories, looking for anything unusual in the monotony. He used to say this thing when I was little, when I couldn't sleep. A sort of poem or rhyme. 8 stars shine bright, 3 roads converge, 17 steps to dawn. I always thought he was just making up nonsense to bore me to sleep. Thomas's fingers froze over the keyboard. Say that again. 8 stars shine bright. 3 roads converge. 17 steps to dawn. That clever bastard. Thomas was already typing. Those aren't random numbers. 8317. Let me try. The code stream stopped. A window opened, and suddenly the screen filled with documents, photographs, spreadsheets. How did you... It's your birthday, Thomas said softly. August 3rd, 2017. No, wait. He checked something. August 17th, 2003. You're 17 years old. He hid the key in plain sight, in the one thing that mattered most to him. Something in my chest cracked open. After last night, after being thrown out like garbage, this felt like a message from my father. A breadcrumb trail saying, I'm sorry. I had to. But here's the truth. The food arrived, and we ate while scrolling through the files. Most of it was over my head. Financial records, shipping manifests, personnel files. But Thomas seemed to understand, his expression growing darker with each new document. What is all this? I asked around a mouthful of eggs. Evidence. Your father's been collecting it for years, documenting everything he could find without drawing attention. Thomas tapped a series of photographs showing the same man in different locations. He never stopped investigating. He just got better at hiding it. Who is that? Senator William Hargrove. On the surface, he's a respected politician, chairman of the Intelligence Committee. But, according to these files, Thomas pulled up a document covered in highlighted sections. He's been funneling classified information to foreign buyers for at least a decade, and he's just one node in a much larger network. I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. If my dad had all this evidence, why didn't he go to the police, the FBI? Because according to this, Thomas pulled up another file. At least 3 high-ranking FBI officials are part of the network. Same with the DOJ, the CIA, Homeland Security. Your father didn't know who he could trust. So he kept digging, kept documenting, waiting for the right moment or the right person. And then they found out. Thomas confirmed. Which means he must have gotten sloppy, or... He stopped, his face going pale. Or what? Or someone told them. Someone close enough to know he was still looking. Thomas started typing furiously, pulling up more files. Wait, look at this timestamp. This file was modified 2 days ago. And this one. And this one. So your father hasn't touched these files in years. I can see the access logs. He hasn't even opened this drive in months. Thomas looked at me, fear plain on his face. Someone else has been in here. Someone got past his encryption. The diner suddenly felt too bright, too exposed. Every customer looked like a potential threat. The businessman in the next booth. The young couple by the window. Even the waitress refilling coffee pots. We need to move, Thomas said, already closing the laptop and shoving it in his bag. Now. Where? Somewhere public but anonymous. Airport maybe. Lots of security cameras, lots of people. Harder to make a move without witnesses. He threw cash on the table. Too much, but we didn't have time for change. Come on. We were halfway to the door when it opened and two men in dark suits walked in. They looked like every government agent from every movie. Sunglasses indoors, earpieces just visible, postures that screamed, armed and trained. Their eyes swept the diner and locked onto us. "Back door," Thomas hissed, steering me toward the kitchen. The waitress looked up, startled, as we pushed through the swinging door. "Hey, you can't—" "Emergency," Thomas said, pressing more bills into her hand. "We were never here." We burst out into an alley behind the diner. Thomas pulled me left, away from the street, toward a parking lot. He clicked a key fob, and a nondescript sedan's lights blinked. "Get in." I dove into the passenger seat as Thomas started the engine. We were pulling out when I saw the two suited men emerge from the alley, speaking into their wrists, heads swiveling. Thomas merged into traffic, keeping exactly to the speed limit, nothing that would draw attention. But his knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "They found us too fast," he muttered. "Way too fast." "What does that mean?" "It means they've been tracking something, either my car, my phone, or—" He glanced at me. "When's the last time you checked your phone?" I pulled it out of my pocket. The screen showed 3 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize and several texts from Marcus asking where I was. "This morning, I guess." "Why?" "They could be tracking it. Give it here." I hesitated. That phone was my last connection to my old life, to my friends, to normalcy. "Marcus, if they're following that signal, they know exactly where we are every second." I handed it over. Thomas rolled down his window and tossed it into a trash can as we passed. "There goes my contact with the real world," I muttered. "There goes the way they track us," Thomas corrected. He pulled into a shopping center parking lot and found a spot near the back. "Okay, new plan. We need to get this information to someone who can actually do something with it. But we need to be smart about it. Your father spent years building this case. We're not going to waste it by getting ourselves killed in the next hour." Who can we trust? That's the million-dollar question. Thomas pulled up the files again, searching through names and connections. There has to be someone outside the network, someone your father identified as clean. We spent 20 minutes going through the documents while shoppers passed by, unaware of the deadly game being played in their parking lot. Finally, Thomas found something. "Here, Margaret Chen, investigative journalist for the Washington Standard. Your father has notes here. Outside the system, proven trustworthy, protected sources under threat of contempt." She broke that defense contractor story last year. I remembered. It had been huge news, led to congressional investigations and indictments. "You think she'd believe us?" "If we show her this? Absolutely. The evidence is solid." Thomas was already pulling up her contact information. "She's based in D.C., but according to her social media, she's currently in Philadelphia for a conference. That's only 2 hours from here." "So we drive to Philadelphia and just hand her a USB drive?" "Not quite that simple. First, we need to make sure we're not followed. Second, we need to set up a safe meeting place. Third," he paused, considering. "Third, we need insurance." "What kind of insurance?" "The kind that keeps them from killing us even if they find us." Thomas started typing quickly. "I'm going to upload these files to a dead man's switch. If I don't check in every 12 hours, the files automatically get sent to every major news outlet, law enforcement agency, and congressional office in the country. They can kill us, but they can't stop the information. It was smart, but it also made everything feel terribly real. We were talking about our deaths like they were an actual possibility. How long will that take? Already done. Thomas closed the laptop. I set this up years ago, just in case. Paranoia pays off sometimes. He started the car. Now we drive. Stay alert. If you see the same car behind us for more than a few minutes, tell me. We merged back into traffic and headed north. I watched the side mirror obsessively, trying to memorize every vehicle behind us. A blue sedan stayed with us for 10 minutes before turning off. A black SUV replaced it for another 5 miles. The SUV, I said. It's been there a while. Thomas took the next exit without signaling, then immediately pulled into a gas station. The SUV continued on the highway. False alarm, he said. But good eyes. We repeated this pattern several times over the next hour. Sudden turns, unexpected stops, backtracking. By the time we finally got on the highway toward Philadelphia, I was reasonably sure we'd lost any tail. So, what happens after we give this to the journalist? I asked. Do we just go back to normal? Thomas was quiet for a long moment. There's no going back, Marcus. Even if we expose the network, even if people go to jail, you'll always be the kid who blew the whistle on something powerful people wanted hidden. Your father will always be the agent who couldn't let it go. That's not exactly comforting. No, he agreed. But it's honest. Though I will say this, it's better than living in fear. Your father's been in prison for 11 years, trapped in a life that wasn't really his, terrified every day that they'd come for him or you. Maybe this way, he finally gets to be free. I thought about the man who'd thrown me out last night, the hollow-eyed ghost who barely spoke, who worked and ate and slept like a robot going through motions. Was that really my father? Or just what was left after years of fear had eaten away everything else? Tell me about him, I said. Before? What was he like? Thomas smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. Brilliant. Funny. He had this laugh that could fill a room. Your mother used to complain that she could never stay mad at him because he'd crack some terrible joke and she'd lose it. His expression turned wistful. They were good together. She grounded him, kept him from disappearing into his work completely, and he made her laugh every single day. I barely remember her. She looked like you, Thomas said. Same eyes, same stubborn chin. She would have been proud of you making this choice, standing up even when it's terrifying. I didn't feel brave. I felt like a scared kid who'd gotten dragged into something way over his head. But maybe that's what bravery was, doing the terrifying thing anyway. We were an hour outside Philadelphia when Thomas's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. It's your father. My heart stopped. Answer it. Thomas put it on speaker. Richard. They know. My father's voice was rough, urgent. They know you have the files. They know you're with Marcus. How? It doesn't matter how. What matters is they're mobilizing. You need to get those files out now, before they catch up to you. We're almost to Philadelphia, Thomas said. We have a meeting set up with Margaret Chen. That's not going to work. Papers rustled on my father's end. Chen's been in a car accident, happened 20 minutes ago. She's alive, but hospitalized, unconscious. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. They got to her already? They're cleaning house, taking out anyone who might help you. You need a new plan. My father's voice cracked. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I dragged you both into this. I should have just let it go years ago. Dad. The word felt strange on my tongue after years of silence. Dad, it's okay. We'll figure it out. Marcus? He sounded shocked to hear my voice. You shouldn't be there. You should be far away from this. Yeah, well, apparently genetics trump good sense. We're doing this together. A sound that might have been a laugh or a sob came through the line. Just like your mother, stubborn as hell. We need options. Thomas cut in. Who else can we trust? Who else is outside their reach? There's one person, my father said slowly. James Mitchell. He was part of our original team, but he left before things went bad. Went completely off grid. I haven't spoken to him in 20 years, but I know he keeps tabs on certain things. If anyone would believe you and have the resources to do something, it's him. Where is he? Last I knew, he was in Montana, running some kind of private security consulting firm. But Marcus... My father's voice went hard. James is complicated. He plays his own game, follows his own rules. If you go to him, there's no guarantee he'll help. There's also no guarantee he won't sell you out if it serves his interests. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement, I said. No, but it's the truth, and right now, truth is all I can give you. A pause. I need to go. They'll be tracking this call. Thomas, keep him safe, please. Always, Thomas promised. Marcus? My father's voice softened. Last night, I didn't mean those words. You understand that, right? I had to make them believe. I know, I said, and realized I meant it. I know, Dad. The line went dead. Thomas was already pulling up a map on his phone. Montana, that's what, 1,800 miles? 2 full days of driving if we push it. We don't have 2 days. No, he agreed. We don't. Which means we fly. Won't they be watching the airports? They'll be watching flights under our real names, but I've got credentials we can use. Not strictly legal, but this whole situation left legal behind about 3 crimes ago. He took the next exit, heading toward Philadelphia International Airport. We'll dump the car, buy tickets with cash under false names, and be in Montana by tonight. It seemed impossible, but then again, everything about the last 24 hours seemed impossible. We ditched Thomas's car in long-term parking and took a shuttle to the terminal. Inside, the airport was chaos. Crying babies, angry travelers arguing with gate agents, security lines that snaked through the terminal. Perfect cover for 2 people trying not to be noticed. Thomas led me to a small office tucked behind the main ticketing area. The sign said, Platinum Services, by appointment only. He knocked twice, paused, then knocked once more. A woman opened the door, older, sharp-eyed, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. Thomas Webb, I heard you were dead. Greatly exaggerated, as always. We need tickets to Montana, today. Names don't matter. She looked between us, taking in my rumpled clothes and desperate eyes, Thomas's tense posture. This is going to cost you. Everything I have left, Thomas said. And a favor from Richard Larson. The woman's expression shifted. Richard's calling in markers? Must be serious. She stepped back, letting us in. Come on, let's see what we can do. 20 minutes and most of Thomas's cash later, we had boarding passes under the names David Martinez and Son. Our flight left in 2 hours. Stay in crowded areas, the woman, she'd never given her name, advised. Don't make eye contact with anyone in suits. If you see the same face twice, move. She handed Thomas a small card. And if things go really bad, call that number. Tell them Sparrow sent you. Thank you, Linda, Thomas said. So she did have a name after all. We killed time in a busy sports bar near our gate, nursing sodas and picking up French fries neither of us wanted. Every person who walked by made me tense. Every announcement over the PA system sounded like a trap. How do you live like this? I asked Thomas. Always looking over your shoulder, never trusting anyone? You get used to it, or you go crazy. Sometimes both. He glanced around the bar. For what it's worth, I'm sorry you got pulled into this world. You deserved better. Did you have kids? A family? Once. Long time ago. She left when she figured out I'd never really be present, never fully there. Can't blame her. He smiled sadly. This life, it takes everything. Your father understood that. That's why he tried so hard to give you something different. Fat lot of good it did. Hey. Thomas leaned forward. Don't diminish what he sacrificed. He gave up who he was, everything that mattered to him, to give you 18 years of normal. That's more than most people in our line of work ever get. And you turned out pretty well, considering. You don't know me. I know you're smart enough to see the patterns, brave enough to take the USB drive, and loyal enough to want to help your father even after he kicked you out. That's enough. Our flight was called. We boarded with the crowd, found our seats in the middle of coach, and tried to look like normal travelers. I'd never been on a plane before. Under different circumstances, I might have been excited. The flight was uneventful, a small miracle given how the last day had gone. We landed in Missoula just after 6 p.m. local time. Thomas rented a car under another fake name, and we drove north into the mountains as the sun set. How do you know where we're going? I asked as the roads got smaller and the civilization sparser. I don't, exactly. But your father mentioned Mitchell ran his business out of somewhere called Silver Creek. Can't be that many security consulting firms in small Montana towns. He was checking his phone, looking for signals. There, Silver Creek Security Solutions, 40 miles north. The Montana landscape was stunning. Pine forests and mountain peaks, rivers that caught the dying light. It should have been peaceful. Instead, it felt like driving into the unknown, every mile taking us further from safety and deeper into whatever game my father and Thomas had been playing for decades. Silver Creek turned out to be less a town and more a collection of buildings scattered along a mountain road. The security consulting firm was at the end of a private drive, a modern structure of steel and glass that seemed out of place among the rustic cabins. Thomas parked at the gate. An intercom crackled to life before he could even reach for the button. State your business. James Mitchell. Tell him Thomas Webb and Richard Larson's son need to see him. Tell him it's about the network. Silence. Then. Drive up. Park in front. Keep your hands visible. The gate swung open. We drove slowly up the winding drive, acutely aware that we were probably being watched by multiple cameras and possibly gun sights. The house, because despite its modern appearance, that's what it was, loomed ahead. A man stood on the front steps. tall, built like he spent hours in a gym, with gray streaking his dark hair. James Mitchell, presumably. Thomas Webb, he said as we got out of the car. Heard you retired. Heard you went native. Something like that. Mitchell's eyes shifted to me. You must be Marcus. You look like your mother. Everyone keeps saying that. Because it's true. Come inside. We have a lot to talk about, and not much time to do it. The interior was as impressive as the exterior. High ceilings, expensive furniture, walls lined with monitors showing various feeds. This wasn't just a house. It was a command center. Mitchell led us to an office where a massive desk held 6 computer monitors. He gestured for us to sit. Before we begin, he said, settling into his chair, you should know that your father's been feeding me information for the last 3 years. Thomas and I exchanged glances. What? He found me about a year after you all thought I'd disappeared. Asked if I was still interested in taking down the people who killed Sarah, your mother. He nodded at me. I told him I was, but I wasn't going to do it stupid. I had resources, connections, ways of moving money and information that he didn't. So we made a deal. He'd feed me evidence, and I'd build a case. You've known about the network this whole time? Thomas sounded betrayed. Not everything. Richard was careful, paranoid even. He'd only give me pieces, never enough to see the whole picture. Said it was safer that way. Mitchell pulled up files on his screens, the same ones we'd seen on the USB drive, plus many more. But I've been doing my own digging, and I think I've figured out what they're really after. What? I leaned forward. It's not about money or power or any of the usual motivations. It's about control of information itself. He pulled up a schematic that looked like a network diagram. They've been systematically placing people in positions where they can control, manipulate, or suppress information. Media companies, tech firms, government agencies, telecommunications. They don't just want to be part of the system. They want to be the system. To what end? That's the question your father couldn't answer. But I think... Mitchell pulled up another file, this one showing financial transactions. I think they're building towards something big. Some kind of coordinated action that requires simultaneous control of multiple information streams. I don't know if it's an economic attack, a political coup, or something else entirely. But it's coming soon. The timing of their move against your father suggests they're in the final stages. Thomas was already on his feet, pacing. We need to expose them, now. Before whatever they're planning happens. Agreed, which is why I've already started. Mitchell hit a few keys, and news websites appeared on the monitors. I've been seeding information to trusted journalists for the last 6 hours, ever since I got word about Richard's message to you. By tomorrow morning, this story is going to break wide open. But they took out Margaret Chen, I said. They'll take out others. They can't take out everyone, not simultaneously. The information is already in too many hands. Mitchell smiled grimly. Your father's evidence, combined with what I've gathered, is bulletproof. People are going to jail. The network is going down. It seemed too easy. After all the fear and running, could it really be over? There's a catch, isn't there? Thomas asked. There's always a catch. Mitchell's expression sobered. The people at the top of this network, we don't have enough on them yet. The major players will slip away, reorganize, rebuild, This is a victory, but it's not the end of the war. And us? I asked. My father? What happens to us? Witness protection, probably. New identities, new lives. You'd have to leave everything behind. Mitchell looked at me sympathetically. I know that's not what you want to hear at 18, but it's the safest option. I thought about it, leaving behind Marcus, Katie, the Petersons and the Chens and Mrs. Alvarez. My school, my town, my entire life. Again. What's the alternative? You stay visible, stay public. Make yourselves too well known to quietly eliminate. Testify in the trials. Become advocates for transparency and accountability. Mitchell shrugged. It's dangerous, but it's also a kind of armor. Hard to make someone disappear when millions of people know their face and story. Thomas and I looked at each other. I could see the calculation in his eyes, weighing risks and options. I'm 18, I said slowly. I've spent my whole life being safe, being quiet, being nobody special. Maybe it's time to continue 11:53 p.m., someone who matters. Marcus, Thomas started. My mother died because she got too close to the truth. My father spent 11 years in a prison of fear. If we just disappear again, nothing changes. The next person who gets close to something they shouldn't, the next family that gets caught in the crossfire, it just happens again. I straightened. I want to testify. I want to make sure people know what happened and why. Mitchell nodded approvingly. Brave choice. Stupid, maybe, but brave. The story of my life lately, I muttered. Over the next hour, Mitchell walked us through his plan. The information would break in waves. First the financial crimes, then the corruption, then the deeper conspiracy. By the time the week was out, congressional investigations would be underway. By the time the month was out, indictments would be filed. Your father's evidence is the keystone, Mitchell explained. Everything else corroborates and expands on what he documented. You should call him, let him know. Thomas dialed. This time, my father picked up immediately. Thomas? We're with Mitchell. The information is out. It's done. Silence. Then a sound I'd never heard before. My father, crying. Richard? Thomas's voice was gentle. I'm okay. I didn't think I'd live to see this day. I thought I'd die with this weight on my chest, wondering if I'd done the right thing, if I'd wasted my life on paranoia and fear. He took a shaky breath. Thank you, both of you, and Marcus. I'm here, Dad. I'm proud of you, more than you'll ever know. Your mother would be too. I know. And somehow, I did. Come see me when this is over? Wild horses couldn't stop me. We talked for a few more minutes, making plans for reunions that felt suddenly, miraculously possible. When we hung up, I felt lighter than I had in 24 hours. Mitchell set us up in guest rooms for the night, actual beds after a night on a park bench and a day of running. I should have been exhausted, but I lay awake, mind racing. I thought about the man who'd told me to get out, who'd shattered my world with 2 words. I understood now that it had been an act of love, desperate and terrifying. And I thought about the man he'd been before, brilliant, funny, alive. Maybe, once this was over, I'd get to meet that man. Maybe we'd both get to be who we were supposed to be, instead of who fear had made us. The next morning, Thomas and I sat in Mitchell's office watching the news break. It started small. A financial irregularity here, a suspicious connection there. By noon, it was headline news on every major outlet. By evening, congressional leaders were calling for investigations. My phone, a new one Mitchell had provided, buzzed constantly with messages from journalists wanting interviews, lawyers wanting to represent us, and old friends wondering what the hell had happened to me. "You ready for this?" Thomas asked as we prepared for our first televised interview. "Once you do this, there's no going back to anonymous." "I was never really anonymous," I said. "I was just hiding. There's a difference." The interview went well, I think. I told our story, or at least the parts I could, without compromising ongoing investigations. I talked about my mother, about my father's sacrifice, about the importance of truth and accountability. I didn't recognize myself in the monitor. This person who spoke clearly and calmly about conspiracy and corruption. This wasn't the scared kid from 2 days ago. But maybe he'd been there all along, just waiting for a reason to emerge. Over the following weeks, the dominoes fell. Indictments were filed. Arrests were made. Some of the names shocked me. People I'd seen on TV, leaders I'd been taught to respect. Others I'd never heard of, but their positions made the scope of the network clear. My father came to Montana once it was safe. We sat on Mitchell's deck, watching the sun set over the mountains, drinking coffee and talking about everything and nothing. "I'm sorry," he said for the 100th time. "For last night, for all the years before, for—" "Stop," I interrupted. "I get it now. I understand. You did what you had to do. I took your childhood. You gave me a life, a different one than I might have had, maybe, but a life. And now we get to build something new." I looked at him, really looked, seeing him clearly for the first time in years. Together. He smiled, and it transformed his face. This was the man Thomas had described. The one my mother had loved. He'd been there all along, buried under layers of fear and grief. Together, he agreed. 3 months later, I enrolled at a college in Montana. Not where I'd planned to go, not the future I'd imagined when I was filling out applications in my old bedroom, but mine, chosen freely, built on truth instead of secrets. Thomas stayed nearby, teaching security consulting part-time and writing a book about his years in intelligence. Mitchell continued his work, always chasing the next threat, the next conspiracy. My father got a job teaching mathematics at a local community college, rediscovering the joy of work that challenged his mind without eating his soul. We had dinners together every Sunday, a strange makeshift family bound by shared trauma and hard-won truth. We talked about my classes, about Thomas's book, about my father's students. Sometimes we talked about the network, about the trials still ongoing, about the people we'd lost. But mostly, we talked about the future, about the people we were becoming, now that fear wasn't calling the shots. I still thought about that night sometimes. The click of the TV turning off. Those 2 words that changed everything. Get out. It had felt like an ending, but it had really been a beginning of truth instead of silence, a beginning of courage instead of fear, a beginning of family forged by choice, not just blood, and maybe eventually a beginning of peace. The story wasn't over. The trials would continue for years. There would be appeals and reversals and small corruptions that would never fully be rooted out. The world was complicated and messy and resistant to simple narratives of good versus evil. But we'd struck a blow. We'd proven that truth could win, that ordinary people could stand up to extraordinary corruption, that love could motivate resistance even when resistance seemed impossible. My mother would have been proud. I was proud. And every morning when I woke up, I wasn't silent anymore. I was alive.